Hi, everybody. This is Josh Feedy. Welcome to the Founder's Mentality. We're going to do something a little different today, and two things a little different. Number one, you might notice that I'm positioned a little differently in the studio. That's because I don't actually have any guests with me in the studio. This is a remote podcast. We're going to try this for the first time. This might be the last time we ever do this, or it might be the first of many. We'll just see how it goes with my guest today. Regardless, we're also going to call this episode 14.5. And the reason that we're doing that is because I've already recorded episode 15 and 16. Those are going to be released soon. But this guest that I'm having on is working on something right now that is it's very timely. We needed to get the word out about this right now because there's some important things happening right now for this guest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, let my guest introduce himself and tell us really quickly what he's up to. So Terence, welcome to the Founder's Mentality. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Josh. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Terence Steinberg. I am the founder and chief engine officer of the United World Challenge. And the United World Challenge is my mission to ignite a more courageous world by rowing 3,000 miles, solo and unsupported, across the Atlantic Ocean beginning this December.
Okay, so let me just start by saying, on my end, a big no thank you. This sounds absolutely terrifying as far as I'm concerned, but I commend you in this effort, and it is really, really cool. A mutual connection of ours on LinkedIn kind of connected us and was like, Josh, you should get your Sales Reach logo on this guy's ship. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but I would like to talk to him at least and figure out, what exactly is he up to? Let's learn the story behind this a little bit. So where did this come from? What was the inspiration for you to just say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to row forever.
It's a funny thing because I was just talking to a friend about this last night. And I was thinking about how back in maybe 2012 or so, I saw a TED Talk by Roz Savage. Roz was the first woman to row all three oceans solo, okay? And when I saw that talk, I thought, wow, she's so cool. That has nothing to do with me, right? And it's amazing how things change in your life, how one thing leads to another, and before you know it, something that seems completely out of reach is something you can justify. And so in my own journey, I started doing endurance sports as a means of dealing with my mental health. And that was about 10, 11 years ago. And first it was short races. And over time, I realized that the limits I had set for myself were invalid. They were invalid assumptions. And so a couple of years ago, when I found out about this thing called ocean rowing, I realized the only excuses I had were in my head. And I think it sounds like a lot of fun. Now, that might make me crazy, but we can get into that in a moment.
Yeah, no, I am not a psychologist. I'm not here to diagnose your mental health. I also don't need a degree to make it pretty obvious that you're obviously ill, but that's fine. But regardless, so, I have a lot of different founders on this show that talk about their journey of coming up with an idea, launching. Typically, we're talking about products, right? Typically, we're talking about services or products in a business sense. Now, this isn't far off at all. This is exactly the same thing. This is a huge dream. This is a huge mission. This is something that one day you said, I want to do this. But what I'm really curious about is when you have that thought of this is what I'm going to do, what is the next step at that point? Do you start building a boat? What is the next thing that you do?
Yeah. So, this process, like you said, is similar to launching a business in some ways. And the first step, honestly, is having the courage to admit it's something you want to do, right? If you talk to someone who hasn't started a business before, telling someone what they want to do and actually going public with it is really difficult. And I remember the first time I told someone, kind of sheepishly, to be honest, that I wanted to row across an ocean, or rather that I would. Just admitting it to the world was a huge step. Once you do that, then you have to figure out, to your point, do you build a boat? Do you buy a boat? Do you do an independent crossing, or do you join a race? And so I've actually signed up for a race that's from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean. It follows the route Columbus sailed, and this year there will be 40 teams from all around the world. Some teams are 2, 3, 4 rowers, and a handful of people like myself go at it alone.
Okay. So, How many times have you done this? I mean, you have to have some level of experience before you make this big of an excursion. Like, what was the training regimen like to get in the mental and physical space to actually think you can achieve this?
Well, actually, I'm not a rower. I don't really have any rowing experience to speak of. I'm not a sailor.
Oh, good.
I haven't spent any
Yeah.
meaningful time on the ocean. I'm comfortable
Okay.
around water, but that might not even be a negative thing. Like, to think you have some degree of confidence in the ocean is maybe not good. So, no, there's not much in terms of direct relevant experience, but I have 10 years of endurance racing experience, ultra marathons up to 145 miles. And in that kind of a setting, yes, it's like my longest race was 35 hours nonstop. That's still 35 hours. It's not 2 to 3 months. And so
Right.
there's something here in ocean rowing where you can't incrementally build up to it. You have to take a leap of faith, and that's the beautiful thing in it. Most people who come to this sport or adventure, it's not even so much a sport as an experience, they're not rowers. They just decided, you know what, there's nothing stopping me but myself. And then, of course, there's a question of resources and support and building a brand. And to your point earlier about launching a business, that's where a lot of this is really, you have some strategic decisions to make. Because just getting to the start line requires a massive coordinated effort for resources and logistics and so forth.
Absolutely. So, I mean, let's dive into that a little bit because, I mean, there are so many parallels between what you're doing and starting a business because, I mean, in my journey and many of the founders that I know, step one is getting to a minimal viable product. For you, the minimal viable product was, here I am, here's what I want to do, here's what I think I can achieve. That's essentially your minimal viable product. From there, it's a matter of, do you bootstrap or do you fundraise? And I think in your case, there's been a little of both, right? But obviously, there's got to be some fundraising. And in your world, fundraising would be what? Sponsorships, getting people's names on the boat, getting people behind it. Am I right with this?
Absolutely. That's a big part of it. And I really focused exclusively on sponsorships for the first year or so. And I've gotten some out of it. Have a solar sponsorship that's on the way. I'll make an announcement soon. Have a number of other sponsorships for food and personal training. I'm still looking for a big ticket sponsor who wants to really own the story here. Something where they can say, look, we are a resilient company. We serve our clients and help them be resilient and manage risks, just like I'm doing out on the ocean. Navigating unknown waters is not a rower. And so I'm looking for a partner who can use that story. As I've been doing that search and having meetings, I realized, you know what, the race is coming up, and I've been bootstrapping this thing, putting half of my paychecks in for a year and a half, and I realized, actually, I need some more help, and having built a brand for a couple of years, a lot of people wanted to help, so I launched a crowdfunding campaign a few weeks ago, and so that was another pivot now, and we've raised close to, I think, closing in on $24,000 right now, and that's really exciting. That's helping finish the boat and get some key equipment.
Okay, so number one, we need to get Sir Richard Branson behind this because I think Virgin would be a perfect sponsor, obviously. But number two, where should people be looking for this fundraiser that you're doing? Is this on GoFundMe? Where is this at, and what should they search for?
It is on GoFundMe. If you Google United World Challenge, that's me.
Yep.
So I've started the United World Challenge brand. And if you want to
and when does that
GoFundMe,
close?
That is open. So I will close it once I reach my cost, right? I have a target of $75,000 on that GoFundMe page. And that goes towards things like a life raft, key equipment, batteries, water maker, a simple device like a water maker. Okay, here's the thing. When you spend 2 to 3 months on the ocean, every piece of equipment is really critical, but most of all, your water maker that you produce drinking water from. That one piece of kit is $5,000. Okay, so all of that adds up. This GoFundMe page you can find at unitedworldchallenge.org/launch.
Okay. All right. And I'll make sure to put a link for that on the Founders Mentality website for anybody interested. Additionally, this will be released as a podcast. And so I'll make sure to put a link in the description for that as well for you. So, I mean, really, best of luck raising that money. I mean, it's just like any business, right? I mean, you could hit your goal very easily, or you might fall short of it very easily. I know what you're talking about here. I saw the movie Waterworld. I'm very familiar with the water maker. I don't know. I'm totally kidding. That's a horrible reference and horrible joke. I'm sure you're purifying ocean water, right? I would hope. Let's not go into details just in case. Regardless,
we have
so you used the word race. So are you actually competing against other people at the same time, or is it a timed race against people that have done it before?
It's both, but from a personal perspective, Josh, I'm not interested in a record. I'm not interested in speed or time in this event. In my past races, absolutely, I'm a very competitive person. I like to push my limits. This is already pushing me so much, and most people don't realize you can actually row across an ocean. And that sounds obvious, but the thing is, when people realize something that seems so impossible actually is feasible, what else are we assuming isn't possible? And so my goal in this race, I picked the race because it provides visibility. All of the teams are driving awareness towards all of us together. The race platform itself is driving visibility in media. And so my objectives through this are to engage people, to create photo and video content every day, uploading it from the middle of the ocean, to share the story with people that with the right preparation and attitude, anything is possible. And so it's more that communications and engagement piece that's my goal here. It's not a race as much as it's a platform.
No, I think that's awesome, right? And that is, I've said this on my show before, that's exactly why I created this vlog and podcast, is I want to be 100% transparent with everybody about what it is to build a business, right? What actually goes into it. And I think that the transparency around what you're doing, this business, this race, is very, very cool, right? I mean, this is something that I think many people will watch and say, if he can do that, anything is possible. And that's the exact same in business, right? If that person can launch that business or can take that idea and sell it for $3 billion to Salesforce or whatever it is, then anything is possible. And so it's very, very inspiring. I think one thing that I'm curious about is what other things in your life outside of sport related? What other things? I mean, you must be entrepreneurial in your outside life as well. I mean, this isn't the kind of thing you're obviously very risk tolerant, right? So what do you do outside of the sport world in your life that kind of prepared you for this kind of ordeal?
I really appreciate you asking that question. That's very insightful. I am very fortunate that I, after college, started a series of businesses and organizations that taught me that I appreciate risk, that I enjoy it, that I can thrive in that environment. And right out of college, I launched an NGO. We did medical education in Bolivia and Venezuela. It was called A Tu Lado, which means by your side in Spanish. And I was living in Minneapolis at the time, Josh. So I was actually, awesome, right? I spent years there. And so I would fundraise in the Twin Cities area and organize emergency medical training courses, train first responders in medically underserved communities, and we helped establish the first and only university-accredited training program for emergency responders in Caracas and Cochabamba, Bolivia. And a number of other things. Helped start the Impact Hub, a co-working space in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Been there many times.
There. And so a number of different things like that, where I really had more of an entrepreneurial bent. And to be honest, I went and got my MBA, wanting to upskill a bit. And right now I'm in what I call a reverse sabbatical to corporate America. Currently working for Deloitte doing management consulting, but long term I really see myself in more of an entrepreneurial startup environment.
No, that's awesome, right? I mean, Impact Hub, we have one right here in Minnesota, right? And it's absolutely beautiful. It's on the top of Finnegan's. Actually, though, I think I recently heard some news that maybe they were moving locations. But regardless, it's a beautiful space, very supportive environment for startups. Place that I've spoken at a couple different events. I know a handful of companies that office out of there as well. Very welcoming environment. Very cool to hear that you were a part of that team as well. So, I mean, what's next though? I mean, you're going to complete this, and I'm sure that the day that you complete this, you're probably going to take a couple months to just sit back and relax. But what is the next thing that happens after this?
I don't want to give it away. I can't tell you that. But suffice to say, as a kind of true entrepreneur, you're thinking about the next thing before you finish the first. And I definitely view this as a stepping stone and a platform for me to continue doing more engagement and viewing my role not just as an endurance athlete, but more an endurance artist, using my expeditions as an art form to engage people, push conversations, raise awareness. So I can't tell you specifically what it'll be. I have a mission to finish first, but suffice to say there's more to come.
I think it's safe to assume that a public speaking future it awaits you at some point, whether or not it's a big part of your plan or not. But people are going to want to hear more about this story. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that the more content you produce with the intentions of giving people a roadmap or education, the more people want to know even more about it, right? The content that you're going to produce on this amazing trip that you're about to go on and this amazing feat that you're going to accomplish is just going to inspire more debate, more questions. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to kind of watch what comes out of this for you. We have officially connected now on LinkedIn. I fully expect that you're going to swing into my office next time you swing through Minnesota, especially now knowing that you have roots here. You have to come here. I want to hear more about this, especially when you're done. When you are done with this, let's make it a point whenever you swing through Minnesota when this is done that you swing in. Whether or not you're successful in this journey or not, I want to hear about what happens with it. I'll be rooting for you. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So leading up to it here, exactly when do you leave now? When does this journey start?
The journey's underway. So as a non-rower getting ready to row 3,000 miles, I am on my journey, right? Just like you as an entrepreneur on your journey before you launched and opened your business doors, right? So in that regard, well underway. The row itself begins on December 12th. Of this year.
Okay.
And I'm
it's a good time to go.
2 to 3 months at sea. Yeah, well, people say it's cold, but I say fewer hurricanes, trade-offs.
Yeah, I mean, being risk tolerant and hurricanes you don't have to be tolerant of hurricanes. I think that's a good time. Yeah, but just in case, you are helping to fund a life preserver. I caught that earlier, so I think that'll be there for you just in case, right? My last question about this is, a lot of people talk about in entrepreneurship this being a very lonely journey, right? And I can't really imagine anything more lonely than being in a rowboat by myself in the middle of the ocean. Talk a little bit about mentally how you're preparing for that. And I guess a follow-up to it would be, how much support do you have on this trip? Will there be a safety net close behind within eyesight, or are you literally on your own with a CB radio if worse comes to worse?
It's the latter. It's definitely on your own. Okay. So that's the experience I want. That's the experience that I'm after. It's unlikely I'll see anyone from the first day to the last. And so it is really an experience of self-reliance. That said, you have a satellite phone. I can call the race director if I have a problem. And there are 2 hours every day I have to have the phone on for them to be able to reach me. I have people back on land who are giving me advice based on weather routing, storms that might be coming. So there is a team supporting you. Now, what I've heard from one previous solo ocean rower, she says, actually, you're not that lonely out there. If you know yourself well enough when you head out, most of the time, those people, if you're attracted to this in the first place, you know yourself that it's not going to be, the loneliness won't be the dominant experience. And in her case, it was when a whale would breach beside her And she said, wow. She wants to turn to someone and say, did you see that? And it's really the highs that you're not sharing with someone rather than the lows you want to. I think I'll feel lonely when I see the beautiful sunsets that bring tears to my eyes, and I want to share that with someone else. But as far as what I'm doing to prepare for that now, it's an awareness of my emotions, to be honest. It's recognizing what are my coping mechanisms, what am I hiding from. So it's things like journaling on a more regular basis. It's a meditation retreat that I took for a week earlier this spring. I'd never done that before. It honestly scared me, but I realized in the context of spending a couple of months alone on the ocean, a few days by myself in a cabin isn't so bad. And so spending some time just sitting, because as you know, as an entrepreneur, there's always more to do than you can get done. And being able to own that, hold it, and then let it go, that's the same process I'll have to go through on the ocean when I'm getting beaten by the waves and regretting my decision to be out there. There's only so much that's in your control. And so it's meditation and awareness of that process internally that is actually the bigger piece of training, even more so than physical.
I love that. One of the things that you mentioned there was another rower that you had conversations with. One thing that I've found in starting businesses is the most valuable thing is to have a trusted group of advisors, whether they're official advisors or not, around you, helping you prepare for the things ahead that you don't know are even going to hit you yet. So, I mean, what other advisors have you had in prepping for this?
Great question. So other ocean rowers in general, it's a small community, as you can imagine. There have been just over 100 people who have solo rowed the Atlantic. So you know them by name. Once you're signed up and you're committed, you can reach out to these folks and they'll ask. So I have a number of people who advise me from a technical perspective. I also have some mentors. So folks who have been helping me out for years from my earlier businesses who I can turn to and I say, hey, I'm launching a crowdfunding. How do you think you can make this appeal to a broad network? Will you be able to contribute personally? Who else can you share this with? And so advisors take many different roles. And then there's also people who I turn to more for my own internal journey. It's less about the strategy and less about the technical piece, but understanding who I am as a person. What are my shadows? And having honest conversations about that. Because like I said, that's in some ways even more important than the technical parts.
I mean, there's so many parallels. I didn't even think about this too much before we did this, but there are so many parallels between what you're doing in entrepreneurship. One of the other things that you said is, how you're in the middle of the ocean and a beautiful whale breach is next to you. You want to tell somebody about that. That is not any different than what I experience on a daily basis in my own life. Because look, I have plenty of friends, but I don't have many friends that are also entrepreneurs. I don't have many people that understand when I call them up and say I just raised $250,000 or something, right? That actually understand that that's not money in my pocket, that's not money. I'm not going to go buy a Porsche with that. I didn't just give myself a raise, right? There's not many people for entrepreneurs they need to have people surrounding them that are in that same space that they can celebrate those things with, because many times it does feel like you're in the middle of a desert or the middle of an ocean with something absolutely incredible happening around you with nobody to understand exactly what it is right next to you, right? There are so many parallels here. I absolutely love this. I love it. Is there
can I make
anything
a
else?
Point to that?
Yes, make a point to that.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is what I'm finding in terms of really combating that loneliness and building connection with others is the more vulnerable and honest I can be about this process. It's very uncomfortable to do that, right? To tell people, okay, I went after sponsorship for a long time and that didn't pan out the way I wanted and I had to pivot and launch this crowdfunding. To tell people, you know what, this is actually incredibly lonely and scary. It's all these aspects. The more I can be honest about that, the more people will step up and engage and see themselves in your experience. And they don't have to relate to raising that cash per se, but they can relate to the process of exposing yourself to risk, of feeling some vulnerability. And that's where we really connect, whether you're starting a business or doing something else. And so I found the way to really combat that loneliness is the more honest I can be, the more truthful I can be. And people from all different backgrounds and walks of my life are showing up to support me in this, and that's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'm really upset right now that we're not doing this in person, because I think you and I have a lot of similarities, and I too have just found that the more transparent I can be about what is happening with my business and what I'm up to, the better reception I get out of people. And sometimes I will put things out there that I feel ashamed of, right? A very good example is when I closed my seed round for my business, it was an incredibly emotional day for me. I recorded a video to document the experience more for myself than anything, but then I challenged myself to put it up on LinkedIn because here I am, the person saying we should all be more transparent. How can I make a video like this and not share it with the world? It was a very humbling experience, and the reception was so incredibly positive. I couldn't believe it, right? And so I think that is exactly what we need in this world, is more people that are just really honest about the experiences that they're going through and what they're doing. What you're doing right now is no different than any scary decision that any CEO of a business or founder of a business or any employee at an organization making a big decision goes through every single day. You are taking a huge risk. You're believing yourself, and you're going for it. And honestly, I wish you all the success with this. I'll be cheering you on. I'll be watching. I expect to meet you in person when you're done with this. I want to hear about the stories. I will buy you your first beer or water or whatever you need when you get off that rowboat.
Hopefully not. Hopefully I don't need water.
Yeah, exactly, right? So best of luck with you. Is there anything that you'd like to end with before we turn this one off for anyone listening that I didn't let you talk about?
So your questions were awesome. I would say anyone who's interested in following along, please follow along under the United World Challenge on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Just look up United World Challenge. Like I said, the journey's underway, and I'm sharing how exactly a non-rower is preparing to row across the Atlantic Ocean. So we'll see you there.
I love it. I mean, look, if you're a would-be founder out there that's never launched a business and you're thinking, how do you do this? How do I start a business? Look at this guy, right? He's going to row across the ocean. I think you can start a business, right? Let's get started. Let's get the information you need, and let's do this. This has been amazing, Terence. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I look forward to tracking everything and reporting to everybody, and I hope everybody found value in this show. It was a little different for the format that we usually have, so I apologize to anyone listening that's going, Josh, you pride yourself on like crystal clear audio and optics. What's going on? We had to make a change here. We had to have him on, and he's not in Minnesota. That's how it works. But regardless...
When we have another session from the ocean, it'll be like this anyway. So
yeah, it's gonna sound a lot like the moon landings, right? We've landed, we're walking around, right? Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But thanks everybody for joining me on this 14th and a half episode, and we will see everybody very soon again on the Founders Mentality. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.